Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's THE student event, all about student accommodation in the UK. I'm Jamie, Head of Content for Student Events here at THE. A big thank you to our sponsors for today's event, Savills and Unite Students. We're lucky to have an incredible panel of experts from Unite Students to provide you with all of the information that you need to choose the right student accommodation in the UK. Where you live when you study abroad can be a big source of stress. And even if you're in the early stages of choosing and applying to universities, you may already be thinking about what your accommodation options are. Your student accommodation plays a huge role in your overall university life. It's where you'll meet friends, spend time studying and socializing, and it will ultimately be your home away from home. Unite Students recently conducted a survey of 2,000 students and found that 75% of the students surveyed agreed that living in university accommodation and being on campus is as important a part of the university experience as lectures and tutorials. And 77% say that they like the greater independence that comes from living away from home. So while understanding your student accommodation options and choosing where to live can be stressful, it's also incredibly exciting. For some students, it will be your first experience living away from home and the first opportunity to really become a part of a community on your university campus. Today, we're going to talk about when you should start looking for accommodation, how to research your options and find the right information, safety and welfare in student accommodation, and so much more. Before we start the discussion with our panel, we have a short video from Unite Students to let you hear from some students who are currently living in their student accommodation and also to get a sneak peek into some of their facilities.
Hi guys, I'm currently living in the Cambridge Court, and it's also the 4th year with Unite Students. Staffs are so friendly, they are really helpful during this hard time. I can get information I want to know via email or online chat immediately, and receptionists can assist to receive and deliver your groceries or parcels if you are self-isolated. Also, they got 24 hours emergency calls and noisy complaint system, which actually works really well, make me feel really safe here. Bye!
Hey guys, this is Alex. I enjoy living United Students for about almost 2 years before I left United Kingdom for its security and the convenience. And for convenience, for example, when I have something packaged to be delivered, an email notification would appear on my iPhone whenever I was on class or I was at my accommodation. For the security reason, and the surveillance camera worked properly well 24 hours, and the door guard at our block can be only opened with our electronic key, which is very, very safe for me.
I really enjoy living here, Unite Students. The staff are super friendly and really helpful. I still remember the first day I arrived Liverpool. They picked me up at the Lime Street train station. And the flat I live is very close to the uni, only a few minutes walking distance. Also, Tesco, Chinese supermarkets and restaurants are all just nearby, which is very convenient for me.
Hello guys, my name is Jackson. I come from China, Hebei, and I have living in Bradford for almost 1 year. And I think the apartment is really nice. I just come here is for the more washing machine, so I think it's a apartment really nice and I feel really convenient and really comfortable. So welcome to book the Brass Founders and Happy New Year.
Hello everybody, my name is Tao and I have been living here about 2 years. And if I have choice, I will stay here in the future. Living here is very comfortable and convenient.
Hello everyone, my name is Jing. I'm from China, Anhui province. Living in Brighton, I think is very convenient, and I made many new friends here. And Happy New Year. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Lee. I'm the Sales and Service Advisor of Brass Founders, and this is our show flat for our premium range Ensuite.
There is plenty of space for you to put your belongings under the bed. We also provide you a desk and a chair and a nice view outside of your window.
So this is our ensuite kitchen at Brass Founders with a nice living room area and a TV for the students to use. Oven here, microwave, 2 cookers per flat, and then finally a washing machine and dishwasher. As you can see, the kitchen is very spacious and has loads of rooms for students to share the space in.
Now we are looking at the bathroom in your ensuite. You will have 24-hour hot water in your bathroom.
Hi, so we're currently in the games room at Brass Founders. I'm here with Lee. So here we've got an air hockey table, a pool table, we've got Twister, and we've even got a football table. Thank you, Lee, for that.
At Unite Student Brass Founders, we also have a gym at the communal area for the students who are living here for free.
Hi, so this is the communal area at Brass Founders. We've got loads of study space for students to do all their university work at.
Such a great look inside some of the Unite student accommodation facilities. And as I said, we're lucky to have 4 representatives from Unite students with us today to help answer all of your questions. And I'd love to give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves. Bernadette, I'd like to start with you. If you could just give us a quick introduction before we jump into the panel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bernadette. I've been working with Unite for more than 4 years now, and I'm looking after international, so just making sure that international students know about Unite and understand what we offer here. So thank you very much for joining this session, and I hope you will find it interesting.
Great, thanks. Abby?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I have been with Unite now for just over 2 years. My team and I are responsible for looking at our short stays and optimizing those bookings, making sure that people understand what they are as well. And I will go into a bit more detail about that later on for you. But yeah, thanks for joining. Looking forward to it.
Great, thanks. And Chloe?
Hey everyone, I'm Chloe and I look after all things sales in our properties. I am based in the city every day, so I'm in one of the properties here today. As you can see, maybe there's some parcels going on behind, but I'm actually based in the city every day in Manchester and Liverpool. Thank you.
Great, thanks. We've got a handful of questions to answer here, and also if anyone in the audience would like to submit your questions throughout the session, please do so using the Q&A function, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But I think it's best to maybe kind of start at the beginning of the timeline. I want to talk about like when students should start looking at their accommodation options and what are sort of the different phases of that journey as they look at what their options are and then, actually start to seriously consider where they might want to live. Bernadette, can you tell us a little bit about when students should start looking and how that should sort of play into the timeline of their university application and attendance journey?
Absolutely. So we always encourage students to think about accommodation as soon as possible during the year. And now is a good time to start looking if they haven't done that yet. The reason for looking early is because, of course, the earlier you start looking, the more options you have available for you. And the more you wait, maybe you will have less choices later in closer to your start date. So yes, the sooner the better. Oops, sorry, can you see me? My screen just went blank. Okay. Yeah, so the sooner the better. It's very important to start early. It's very important to compare your options. And, you know, you have plenty of ways to do that online, but definitely start early. As soon as you have your offer, as soon as you know in which city you're going, start comparing your options online. In terms of the process, this year in particular with COVID, you will probably also be able to ask for live viewings. So, you know, if you want to have a look at what your future accommodation is going to look like, it's something that many accommodation suppliers will be able to do for you. So, you know, don't hesitate to request a live viewing on whatever platform is best for you, whether it's Zoom or WhatsApp. So it's very important as part of your booking stage. And yes, I think that's it, really.
Great. We may have some students in the audience today who are even earlier in the process, right? Who are just kind of starting to think about studying in the UK. But of course, because of COVID and all the circumstances, accommodation is going to be top of mind, and they may be thinking about it even earlier than they would have been previously. What would you recommend for students in terms of, you know, just researching and understanding what their options are even before they get their offers, just so that they can feel sort of a peace of mind about where they're going to live when they're thinking about studying abroad?
Yes, sure. So to start with that, actually, the main options that students have in terms of accommodation when they come to the UK are university halls, private student accommodation like ourselves, like Unite, renting a flat with a private landlord, or to go for a homestay. So a homestay means to stay with a British family, to get the full life experience with a British family. So the key criteria that students should take into account when they are during this research process, the first one is the location. So location is very important. As a student, you want to make sure that you are on campus or close to your campus. So for that, you know, if you book with your university hall or with a private accommodation provider like Unite, that will be the case. You will be on campus or close to your campus. If you decide to book with a private landlord, then it's very important to take that location aspect into account. Are you going to be away from your campus? Is it going to be in a safe part of the town or city where you're going? That's very important to consider that. You should also research the safety. So of course, if you stay in student hall or with a student accommodation provider, we offer something that is really safe and secure. As you could see in the video with the student earlier, no one can get in or out of our buildings without swiping a card. So no stranger can get in. So it's extremely safe for you. If you decide to go for private landlord flat, just make sure again that the area where you are going to live is really safe and secure. Another element to take into account when you are during this research stage is what is actually included in the price. So it's important to mention that in the UK, the price for accommodation is mentioned weekly. So you will see a weekly rate, and maybe in the countries where you come from, it's usually the monthly rate that is displayed. So that is a change in the UK in comparison to other countries. So it's important to understand what your weekly rate actually includes. Does it include all the bills, like the energy bills, your Wi-Fi? So again, with university halls and with Unite, all these bills are included. You don't have to worry about, you know, water, electricity, Wi-Fi. It's all part of your price. If you decide to book with a private landlord, you just need to make sure about whether these bills are included, or if you need to plan additional budgets to cover these monthly expenses. So this is very important. In terms of the service, so you know that you are looking for and that you will get depending on what you book, you can also research that. But if you book with private student accommodation provider like Unite, there are additional services that are included in your bills. So as Chloe mentioned, she's currently in a property and you may see some parcels going on behind her. So this is one of the services that we provide. We always have some staff on site that can get the parcels for you. while you are attending classes or while you are away. So we always have some staff in our buildings to look after the reception desk, collect things on your behalf, support you if you need any additional help. And we also have a lot of teams on site, like a maintenance team to fix things in your flat if anything goes wrong, and all these extra services. Maybe it's not something that you will get, if you go for a private landlord. So it's very important to take all these parameters into account. Some of our buildings also have gyms, for example, and other facilities that you can use. So yes, all this is very important. The last aspect, I guess, is all the convenience around the booking, and it's just very important to know where to look for. So just some tips if you want to go for a private landlord or for homestays. If you haven't been to the UK before, just try to stick with the main websites that have the most authority. So for example, for private rentals, you've got Savills, you've got Zoopla, Rightmoves. I'm sure if you start looking, you will see like the big websites. Try to stick to these ones to avoid any scams or any, unreliable sources. And if you want to go for homestay, you've got some very popular websites as well, like homestay.com or studentstay.co.uk. So just try to stick with the sources that look reliable. You can look online and you will easily identify the biggest one.
That's great. It's all really good advice. And I think especially your remarks about understanding the cost and understanding that it's quoted weekly and things like that, because as students are looking at these things, as I said, even earlier in the process, it's really important to factor in the cost of your housing into your total cost of attendance, so that you're not just looking at tuition and fees at your university, but you're also considering what your accommodation will cost, books and travel to and from campus, and all of those things are important pieces of what that total cost of attendance will look like. And so I think it's really important actually for students to start researching accommodation as early as possible so that they can really plan for what it's going to cost and look at all of the options. I want to turn to Abby for just a second, because there may also be some students who are interested in perhaps short courses or summer courses. And although we know that because of COVID, these things have become perhaps a bit less popular, we certainly anticipate that short courses and summer courses will come back in the coming year or two for sure. And so I just want to briefly touch on what the housing situation is for students who want to come for just a short period of time, and are there options the same as what Bernadette has just described, and what would you advise for students in that situation?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a shorter stay is actually not something that a lot of people would necessarily associate a private student accommodation provider with, actually. So our short stays, or short-term lets as they're sometimes known, particularly with private student accommodation, are put in place exactly for that reason. So if you've got shorter courses, or like a language course, like an IELTS over summer, for example, before you're arriving for your academic year booking, these are considered short stays. We, so Unite, absolutely accommodate those. We actually have a minimum stay of 4 weeks. So you can, that's really quite a short period of time which you can book with us, and actually that's increased since COVID. We are looking at soon hopefully being able to put that back to what was a 2-week minimum stay. So again, it brings up even more options for you as well. So there's a variety of reasons that people use or might consider a short stay. You've got, as I mentioned, your language schools, for example, or your language course over summer, but it could be simply that you want to extend your stay. So you stay with us from September until, let's say, June or July, and then actually you decide, I love it here. Whilst I'm in the UK, I would love to explore another city. Because we operate in over 27 cities, you could stay with us in another location just for a short period of time, for 2 weeks, for example. You know how our buildings work, etc. So it kind of makes sense. And a lot of people do that, which is great. Similarly, people use our shorter stays to arrive earlier, to get familiar with the area. Obviously, it's brand new to you potentially, so you can use that as an opportunity to, just get a bit settled, familiarize yourself with your room, with your property, and also with obviously the city you're in. Not to mention obviously your housemates and flatmates as well, who may also be arriving early. In terms of comparisons with that, you can obviously use a sort of a hotel platform, or like an Airbnb style platform to accommodate that kind of request. But I would just be mindful that you're unlikely to probably get that type of opportunity with, say, a private landlord. They typically have minimum stays of 6 months, up to a year to cover that full academic year for them. So your options are actually relatively limited if a short stay is something that's of interest to you. And yeah, we absolutely, we have a department that covers that. So it's certainly something that we can support with.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the just maybe adding time onto your stay. So if you were a student living in the student accommodation during the academic year and you decided you wanted to stay, or as you suggested, see another city in the UK and have a short-term stay in another property, that is an option. I think that's such a great way for students to make the most of living here in the UK. I want to shift gears a little bit. We've touched just briefly on safety, particularly in your buildings, and we saw a little bit of that in the video. But Chloe, I wonder if you can talk to us just a little bit more about student welfare and safety. We're going to talk separately about COVID and safety and welfare specifically related to that. But I wonder if first you can kind of just touch on generally how you help support students' welfare and safety, and also help build community in your accommodation.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I kind of answer that question, I might just explain a little bit more what welfare is. So welfare is so important in our accommodation for a number of reasons, but of course, students moving away from home to another city or a different country can go through a number of emotions. So isolation, anxiety, worry, stress. I know for definite I would go through all those emotions if I was going to another city. So yeah, for us here, it is so important to make sure that we look after that well-being aspect and how that contributes to their life here and their welfare. So we have got a dedicated team in our cities live every day that are welfare trained, and they have had intensive training on mental health. So we have these teams on site to witness any concerns or students feel comfortable to approach them, that they're going through varying degrees of welfare as such. Alongside this, we also have an emergency control room, and they are available for any student to call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And these are based in our head office, and they can respond to anything. And fire alarm activations, lots of keys lost. As you can imagine, we do have a lot of keys that are lost daily. So they can call that number and someone will go straight to that student to let them back into their flat. But they just generally are able to respond to any safety concerns, and that can either tie in with our welfare team, tie in with our receptions, or anything. Alongside our emergency control centre, we also have a service and safety team. So as I'm in the property now, I am working with a reception team that work 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. typically in most of our properties. So these service and safety team operate 8 p.m. in the evening through to 8 a.m. the next morning. So they're there patrolling our properties and basically just making sure that the site is safe, as Bernadette touched on before about the gate access, and we're making sure that no one's coming in. These team will make sure that they're responding to any concerns or any issues, etc. And this again is really what is typical in private accommodation. If you have a private house, etc., the landlords aren't usually there on site. So that's just also something to consider. If you want that safety aspect, it is usually an accommodation like ours.
Great, thanks. I think you're right. It's just, as Bernadette said earlier, it's really about just kind of weighing all of the things that are important to each student. And, for a lot of students, safety is a big one. And so looking at private accommodation providers is a great way to ensure that you're going to be in a building that is safe and secure, and that you'll have, all of the resources that you need at your fingertips to solve any problems that may arise. I want to talk a little bit specifically about COVID and how you all have been able to support students throughout this year. And I think first is Chloe to come back to you and just to talk about more specifically in the past year related to the pandemic, what additional processes or things have you put in place to help support student welfare and safety? I think, particularly thinking about now when you do have some students back on campus, but knowing that they can't gather in groups, they can't really have big social, events, they can't get together with their friends very easily. So how are you making sure that students are well looked after if they are in their accommodation right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we understand that, as you've just said, we understand that these times have definitely been particularly difficult, and definitely for students, because the university courses have still been ongoing and they are here, but actually not going to lectures each day. So yeah, absolutely. So I've touched on briefly a little bit about what services we have with our receptions, etc. But we also have a student ambassador program. So our student ambassadors are students just like yourself. So you come to our accommodation and you are the ones that we employ, and we pay you for your services, and you help us get involved with check-in, with administration tasks. And actually, more so than ever this year, you've got involved with our social events. So we host events weekly in our properties, and yes, they are on Zoom and they are on another screen, but definitely it's meant that our students can get to know flatmates from across the courtyard, from across another building, as we do have a number of buildings in each of our cities, and they can get to know them. And therefore, it's a quiz or a baking event, or just a coffee morning or something. These events are definitely what people are getting involved in. These students are all within the same property, but yet they've not always been able to meet. So we've been able to do that, and that's definitely combating isolation and loneliness as such. So that in tow really with our welfare support team, with that, and also of our universities. So here at Unite specifically, we do have really close ties with our universities, and they put on events as well. They have mentors that come into the properties, and obviously at times they're not able to do face-to-face, but they're here and able to check up on teams and provide packs and anything that they may need. So all that together has been able to really help them. But our properties itself, we've also put in place, the sanitising stations, the perspex screens on our desks, and also the keep the distance signage. We're doing this to ensure that our services have not been interrupted. So we still want to have the reception open 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. And we've put these screens in place and the barriers to make sure that we can still give the students what they need. So we still, if students have had to come over or they've had to quarantine or isolate, we have a team on site that can still take up the parcels. We can still do food deliveries for you. And we're putting these in place to ensure that our staff are safe, of course, but also the students are. I think there's going to be a link out at the end of this talk, which also has a YouTube channel. And on there is a little bit more detail about what Unite Students has done for COVID-19. So if you're interested, take a look. But yeah, we're definitely making sure that we still have a community in the building, even though we feel quite far apart.
Yeah, good. It's, it's interesting that because of the pandemic, I feel like it's just added a long list of questions and considerations that students need to make when they're thinking about where they're going to live. And we expect that some level of distancing and COVID secure measures will be with us for quite some time probably. And so it's important for students, I think, to know that they can ask these questions of their accommodation providers, find out what processes have you put in place in order to make your accommodation as safe and as functional as possible for students. It sounds like you guys have done a really good job of doing that, but it is good to highlight that that's a question students can and should be asking as they look at all of their options. Thinking a bit more practically, particularly about current students who may find themselves either unable to travel to campus or having to change their travel plans or their study plans. Abby, I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about what you've done to support students financially during this time. What kinds of policies have you put in place? And I think also if we can just highlight again, like what types of questions or things should students be asking as it relates to this particular issue?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, as you point out, this is quite a bespoke to this year and last year sort of question that's definitely one that we appreciate, you know, students will want a lot of reassurance on before committing, you know, to whatever. So when COVID first hit, sort of February, March last year, 2020, we were the first private student accommodation provider to actually completely release all students from their contracts. What that means is that all students who were staying with us at the time of COVID appearing and then understandably wanting to go home and be with their families, we essentially said, that's fine, don't worry about it, no problem. You will not be held liable for any remaining payments on your account. That was actually a huge decision. That was a pretty bold decision for us to make, and one that came at a huge cost to us as a business, but morally and obviously it was the right thing to do at the time. So since then, we've put in place other sort of flexible options for students to give them that little bit of reassurance. So, for example, we allowed students who had booked a September 2020 room with us to, in effect, delay their check-in if they needed to. So at that point in time, we were also experiencing some travel restrictions. And so a lot of students needed to be able to they couldn't get to us for September, essentially. So we said again, okay, check in a bit later then, and you won't have to worry about the full payment from the start, the original start date. We also did the same for those that had a January start date. And actually, in a normal time, we wouldn't have even had a January start date available for students. But again, I think that goes some way to show how flexible and how we've adapted to accommodate students' needs as their university courses have changed, etc. Most recently, we've announced a rent discount. So again, there was a situation where students went home for Christmas, but then couldn't come back, or really struggled to come back. And so, again, rather than just sort of, leaving that as is, we said, look, okay, here's a period of time where you aren't liable for your rent because of that. So and on top of that, we also offered students the opportunity to stay with us for free over summer as well, if they wanted to shift it a little bit. So we believe we've been exceptionally accommodating, and not to mention that we have also put in place a very flexible cancellation policy. So you asked about policies. So our standard cancellation policy, and again in a normal time, is a lot different for this coming term. So from September 21, students actually have the option to cancel their booking. So if you made it now, for example, with Unite, then obviously you actually have the opportunity to cancel completely with no obligation up until the end of May. So that gives you a lot of leeway, a lot of time to be able to really think about your decision whilst having secured a room in the meantime. So that's something that we're absolutely something we're wanting to promote and tell people about naturally. In terms of your other option, that's obviously very Unite specific. So you will find that other private student accommodation providers, similar to Unite, will have similar or alternative things in place. It's certainly worth researching those directly with those providers. Obviously, I can't specifically comment on the details, but yes, they have similar things. So certainly look into that. I'd probably be a little more cautious of private landlords. They tend to be overall not quite as accommodating or flexible, but again, you know, you can look into that in some more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's just important for students to be aware that accommodation providers may or may not have changed their policies, and that it's just something that students need to make sure that they're adding to their list of things to ask and things to research. We certainly hope, at least here in the UK, that we have sort of a path forward in terms of reopening things and getting back to what may more closely resemble normal. But of course, as we've learned in the last year, circumstances can change really quickly. And so I think it will be important for students to, you know, just understand what all of those policies are, understand cancellation policies, understand, you know, flexible policies, so that they're fully informed when they're making decisions about their study plans. We have about 10 minutes left, and I've got actually a handful of questions from the audience that I want to get to. Bernadette, I wonder if you might be able to answer this one. We've gotten someone in the audience who asked, do you serve postgraduate students? And if so, what are the considerations that postgraduate students should make? Is it, you know, is there anything special that they should consider when they're thinking about housing?
Yes, sure. Obviously, when you are an undergraduate student or a postgraduate student, you may have different priorities, different things in your mind. And our portfolio, I mean, if you look at our Unite Students website, you will see that we have various range of accommodation type, from flats with 10 flatmates or flats with 5 flatmates, or even studio accommodation. And I think it's very important when you are a postgrad to consider the time that you will need to focus on your research and your studies, and you may want to have a space on your own when you don't have to share your space with other flatmates, in which case you can go for a studio type, which means you will have your bedroom, your bathroom, and your kitchen, and you won't need to share. So that's your little home where you can really focus on your studies. You may also want to consider, if you do want to share with some friends or flatmates, then you can go for what we call an ensuite room, or which is basically your room and your bathroom in a flat, and you will share the kitchen with your flatmates. So it really depends on what you are after. If you want that social life within your flat, then you have the option to do that. If you want your own space, you also have the option to go for a studio option. You can also look at the size of the properties, you know, we have, and the location, of course. As a postgrad, you may want different things depending on how much interaction you actually have with your university. Some of our postgrads prefer to be like in the center of the city. So again, it's all about what you need. Do you need to be physically on campus a lot, or do you prefer to be closer to the city life and the student like buzz life? And I think, you know, if you go on our website, or if you go online to research, you really need to look at these criteria about your location and whether you want to share your space or not.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question here from the audience about additional fees, things like rental insurance. So we talked a little bit earlier about costs and what students need to consider, but are there additional fees related to accommodation that are not covered that students need to keep their eye out for? Again, the example of rental insurance, is this something that they'll need to get separately? Are there any other costs that you can think of that students should sort of add to their list of things that they need to look into and consider?
I can take that one if you want.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So with your accommodation at Unite, and it's probably the case with other providers as well, you've got a basic content insurance that is included in the price of the rent, and you have the option to upgrade that. So if you have some valuables in your room, like if you are studying music, or, you know, if you've got some very valuable special equipment, like instruments or something that you want to insure, we can recommend once you are in your accommodation, we can recommend some partners that we work with to do that. In the UK, there is something called the council tax, which is like a local tax that tenants normally pay. As a student in the UK, students are exempted from this tax. So you just need to show to the council that you are a student and you won't have to pay this tax, but it's just important to do it. Otherwise, they will chase you for that tax. Apart from that, it's mainly all your any bills that can be linked to your flat. So if your house is using gas or electricity, you've got the heating cost, you've got the Wi-Fi. So it's really to look at all these bills that when you live at your parents' house, maybe you don't really think about, but actually when you live in your own flat, you need to think about working with all these different providers, yes, setting up the contracts, and it can be quite time consuming, and maybe you will have problem with your internet or things like that. So think about how convenient it can be if everything is included in your contract, in your rent price, or if it is separate.
Yeah, I mentioned when we started that going away from home for university and living in student accommodation is for many students, it's the first time that they're living away from home. And so the idea that, student accommodation like Unite or other providers can make that as easy as possible for students, sort of ease them into away from home living versus kind of dropping you in the deep end and having to take care of, as you said, all of your utility bills and things like that. It can be quite a hassle. And so it is definitely something to consider, that you might choose accommodation where all of those things are already included and taken care of. I want to just hit one more question from the audience before we wrap up. And I had it just here, this list of questions. Oh, is it possible to change your accommodation mid-contract to another building of the same provider? So I know you can likely only answer this question from Unite's perspective, but if a student arrived on campus and they weren't happy with their accommodation or they needed to change it for some reason, is there flexibility in terms of moving between your properties or to different rooms within your properties for various reasons? Chloe, perhaps you can answer that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer to that question is yes. Of course, there is a number of things that we have to take a look at, and that if, for example, you're living at one of our properties on the west side of the city and you want to move to the east side, for example, it all depends if we have availability. If there is available rooms in there, then absolutely it's something we can consider. We need to understand what the reasons were, so it would make sure that if we did the move, the same thing wouldn't happen again, or we want to make sure that you're moving for the right reasons and it is the right thing. But yeah, absolutely, we would look into that, because ultimately, if that you as a student are happier in with the property because of friends or a network or whatever, then yeah, we would definitely look into that for you, and that will be dealt with in the property when you check in. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We are just about out of time, so I want to, first of all, thank the audience for joining us today and for your very thoughtful questions. And then, of course, a big thanks again to Unite students, to you guys for joining us, for answering the questions, for being so helpful and providing so much guidance to students who are considering studying in the UK and starting to think about what their accommodation options may be. Also, thanks to Savills for sponsoring today's event. We certainly hope that this has helped answer some of the critical questions around choosing the right student accommodation. For the students who are here, we hope that you'll visit timeshighereducation.com/student for tons more information about student life, application tips, and also to see more information about our upcoming events. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.